Hi everyone, Drini here, and welcome to my channel. So we're going to do a quick Bitcoin update today because as you know, Bitcoin's price action pretty much dictates the entire crypto market. Now that the macroeconomic outlook for not only the crypto space but the rest of the risk on asset classes are in danger here, let's dive into the charts just to see what our potential downside targets are so that we can plan our entries accordingly. And let's dive in. So I have Bitcoin here on a weekly time frame, and before we carry on with our downside target, it's important first to take stock of where we are at the moment and validate or invalidate some of the thesis that we have since a few months back. So our thesis before was because Bitcoin was forming higher lows and it did form a higher high right here. The assumption that we had was this can be a potential running flat structure right here. Unfortunately, that assumption has to be invalidated because we have now formed a lower low from here. So the running flat theory that we have is pretty much invalidated. Another thing to note was we were following this particular ascending channel right here, but unfortunately, in any way that you want to look at it, we have already fallen from that channel accordingly. Regardless of whether you look at it by the bodies, so the trend line for the bodies, or even if you look at it from the trend lines of the wicks, we have already fallen from this particular ascending channel right here. So this ascending channel has pretty much been invalidated. Typically with ascending channels, we do have technical targets. So the technical target of this particular break in the ascending channel would be the lowest end of the channel. So this particular price point right here of around 28,606 is our eventual destination to validate this particular structure right here. So now that we have cleared up some of the invalidated patterns, or at least identify some potential technical targets for the downside break, what do we do from here? So I think the first thing is to establish what type of structure may potentially be forming. And there are a couple. The first one, of course, is we are still at play for the irregular or the expanded flat. We have formed higher lows right here. We have formed higher highs right here. An expanded flat structure would pretty much look like this. So you have this move right here. We fail to break this particular resistance. An expanded flat would pretty much break the lower lows right here, settle into a particular price level before our eventual move up. The other scenario, of course, is we go on full-on capitulation of a bear market, where this is a potential play right here when we overlay this particular structure, for example. So this, when we overlay this particular structure, if we start to see very sideways movement where nothing much is happening and the world and the macroeconomic environment continues to be very poor, then it's only a matter of time before we experience eventual capitulation to the downside. So regardless of the situation where we're in, given that Bitcoin is still below the weekly structure that we have here, then we expect that we have to identify downside targets where we can potentially either DCA in or have a solid entry before hopefully the continuation to the upside. One of the ways to do that is we can overlay a reverse Fibonacci where this particular candle right here is the one. Why is this the one? Because this was the official confirmation of the break-in structure where we closed below our weekly bullish structure right here. So if this is the one right here and this is the 0, which is the 69,000 all-time high range, the 1618 extension of around $29,000 right here, which is very similar to the downside target that we had earlier for the ascending channel. So this is our first downside target number 1. The second downside target is if we break through this 1618, then the 1.618 to the 2 is a giant chasm that has to be filled in order to meet our second downside target of around 23,668. This downside target of 23,668 or 629 also coincides with the 200-week moving average right here. And right now, this is still below it, but you can imagine that we will struggle a little bit here, struggle a little bit here. The 200 weekly SMA would catch up like this, and eventually, upon further capitulation to the downside, then do expect that this may potentially be filled, and this would be our last line of support before our eventual move up. How can we potentially say that this is an adequate support? In previous bear markets, if you notice, we do eventually find this level of support. This was the level of support from before. The past bear markets, this was also the level of support which we pretty much followed before our eventual move up. So at the end of the day, there are really a number of options here. The first one, of course, is regardless of what happens, the safest play if you are planning to really come into the crypto space is really just focus on Bitcoin at the moment. The macroeconomic factors do not correlate well with investing in very risky altcoin positions. Unfortunately, even our gaming cryptos are not exempt to this. So regardless of whether or not you want to follow downside targets like this, or you just happily DCA and just have a risk threshold of, let's say, 40,000, where as long as Bitcoin is below 40,000, for example, you continue to DCA. And once Bitcoin is above 40,000, you stop DCAing. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, during bear markets like this, it is very important to really think longer term than worrying about your portfolio value going down and down. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. So the best thing to do is to accumulate as much as we can, because Bitcoin is really not going anywhere. Regardless of whether it falls to 29,000, regardless if it falls to 23, 20K, whatever downside targets that you may identify, Bitcoin really is not going anywhere. So right now, the strategy, at least personally for me, is to accumulate as much Bitcoin as I can, because Bitcoin at the moment is at levels where it's really too good to pass up in order to build my retirement portfolio or my portfolio that leads to my financial independence. Yo, before you go, like this video, subscribe, and share this video to your friends. Thank you very much and have a good day.